So, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, apologies for this minor delay due to some technical difficulties. I hope everyone can hear us well, both online and offline. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this year's Iustoria conference, our 5th student conference in legal history. And unfortunately, we have some changes in the program, mainly pertaining to the opening. So 2 of our opening speakers are unable to attend due to very justified reasons. So our dean, Professor Zoran Milkovic, has a medical situation with one of his children. He was really unable to join us. He told me to say hello to everyone, to wish you all a successful conference. And our second opening speaker, Professor Emeritus Sima Avramovic, is also unable to join us today due to some official obligations that he has in his diplomatic capacity, so that we shall now have more time to hear our present keynote speaker, Professor Milena Polojac, full professor of Roman law and the head of the Department of Legal History at our faculty. Professor Polojac, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nina. I'm really very happy that I can open this 5th conference, and I will speak today a little bit with a special emotion, because it is not only about original and provocative ideas of legal transplants exposed in the book written 50 years ago. It is also about its author, Alan Watson, a great scholar and professor, our dear guest here in Belgrade and in Serbia, even in a way member of our university at the law faculty 4 years. He was Dr. Honoris Causa at the University of Belgrade, the founder of the Alan Watson Foundation, a regular guest of our faculty, and co-editor-in-chief of the Annals of the Faculty of Law in Belgrade. And also he published for the first time in Belgrade one of his several dozen books he wrote, and this is entitled The Shame of Legal Education. The story that goes behind his glory as a world-famous intellectual and scholar, it is also very interesting and intriguing, and could be a good lecture for young people and for young students. His ideas were original, stimulating, provocative, and often amusing. He refused to accept established beliefs just because they were established. His ideas were often rejected by many mainstream scholars. He liked to provoke, and it does not come without costs. Much of his work received severe criticism. However, Alan Watson liked the opportunity to defend his work. He probably was most in his element when he was defending his ideas. This was the case also with the most famous book of his, Legal Transplants. Reactions were at the beginning mainly, let's say, unfavorable. Of the reviews were even hostile. The book was considered too short, lacking systematization, lacking methodology, and deeper elaboration of social, political, and the economic context. His conclusions were considered as either trivial or banal. Many years that they were passed until the book received an enormous reception around the world and became judged as classic of comparative law, a landmark book. I'm sure that we will hear more about that from Professor Jean-Francois Gerkens later on this morning. There are many other interesting facts about Alan Watson. His wife Camilla witnessed that his notes were always handwritten because Alan had never mastered the art of the computer. Everything he ever wrote was done in the old-fashioned way with a pen and paper. And his work, which is of course immense, is always based on original texts he translated himself, and he had disdain for those who worked from secondary sources. Also more about Alan Watson and these interesting facts of his life, I think Professor Sima Abramovic will tell you on Wednesday, I suppose. I remember very well the moment when I first met Alan Watson. It was in year 1991 in Miskolc, Hungary. This was my first international conference of legal historians, famous CEDA conference. At that time, I was PhD student. Since that time, I met him many times, mainly in Belgrade. He was a regular guest here in Belgrade and Serbia, and he loved coming here. And he had all the time in the world for any of us, no matter whether one is a student or professor. And I'm very happy that we can show by this conference what an influence he had on our work and how much we appreciate the time that he devoted to us and that we have a sincere affection for him. I will finish with these words, and I wish you very successful conference, and of course my all compliments for the organizers. And I will give now I will ask Milena to say a few words in the name of our organizers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Polojac. I did not expect to give a speech at the opening, but it is my pleasure to just say a few words regarding the history of our conference, because this is our first small round anniversary, our first lustrum, our 5th conference. Our idea to start a student conference in legal history started in early 2020, so just before the COVID pandemic would break out. We did not know that, of course, but we intended to have a big conference in March 2020, which obviously did not take place. At that time, we were all very optimistic and decided to postpone it for the autumn, thinking everything would be over in the fall. Of course, as you recall, it wasn't. And so our first and our second and even our third Iustoria took place online. But despite the fact that they were only online events, they were very successful. We've had a lot of participants. We met a lot of foreign friends, some of whom continued to visit us in person. Our last year's conference was the first one to be held primarily in person here at the Faculty of Law, but we have always kept the hybrid format so that our foreign colleagues could listen more easily and that some of them could present without having the expenses of coming here. And it was always our idea to connect the conferences with some interesting anniversary. So our first had been named Law, Codes, and Women because that year was the anniversary of the Serbian Civil Code, which was also very infamous for the way it had treated women in marital law and the law of inheritance. So that had been our inspiration. When applications started coming, we scrapped the codes part, and essentially it was a law and women conference because people gave many interesting applications that did not really concern a codification, but did involve some important institute. And after that, we had law and religion. Then we had law, health, and medicine. That one wasn't because of an anniversary. That one was because of the COVID. And we almost had a chance to have it in person, but it was still relatively risky. So that was the third online one. Last year, we had law and punishment because it was the 150th anniversary of the abolishment of the corporal punishment here in Serbia. And this year, we have legal transplants because it is the 50th anniversary of the publication of this important book that Professor Polojac has already told you about, and that Professor Gerkens will surely also say some words about. So let me just say one more time that it's my pleasure to see you here, both people present in person and you who are following us online. I hope we will have another successful conference, and I hope to see you again, at least some of you, next year.